Did any of you go to Rob's session on needs analysis earlier?
No.
Excellent, because I'm going to mention needs analysis, but everything he said, which was wonderful, has sort of slightly upended my loose term of needs analysis. So it was a really good session if you're looking for things to watch after the fact. It's 12:20. We've got a rather packed schedule, so I'm going to kick us off. So anyway, thanks for joining our symposium that's entitled TNE Emerging Conversations. We're going to share it between 5 of us into 4 sections, and us are the 5 people listed here. That's me, I'm Liz. We've got Jen there, we've got Sophia here, and we've got Sam there, and Stella will appear on screen because she's in China right now, but she'll be a recorded session. We are all committee members of the Transnational Education SIG, and we're going to talk about the importance of the transnational context for EAP practitioners. So you might have seen other definitions of what TNE is. I've picked out one of the simpler ones. We can talk about that later with the questions if you had questions about what transnational education really is. The box on the right gives a few examples that are quite common to see. These international branch campuses, dual degree programs, joint institutes, etc. The number of TNE students is huge. So this is the blue box on the right. UK students on TNE programs alone is getting close to 500,000, which is more than the international students on the onshore programs. So our question, to what extent does TNE deconstruct and reconstruct EAP thinking and practices? We ask the small questions. We're going to organize it into 4 sections. We're having a bit of a rant. Don't judge us for trying to pigeonhole the letters here, but the ideas behind them are really sound. We thought that we will hope to have time at the end for some discussions. So here's 2 overarching questions for you to ponder as you listen to us. In what ways does TNE offer opportunities for deconstruction and reconstruction of EAP? And what challenges are there for EAP in this emergent TNE landscape? At which point I'm just going to pass over. And Sam.
Great. Okay, so my name is Sam, and that works, that's great. And Sophia and I are going to be talking about reconstructing identity. So I'm just going to start with a really broad overview of English medium instruction, or EMI, before Sophia comes in and talks about translanguaging in this context. So just to begin with a brief definition that we have, as you can see on either side of me. It's the use of English language to teach academic subjects other than English itself in countries or jurisdictions where the first language of the majority of the population is not English. So this has been seen as a means to internationalize higher education. So for example, to attract more international students to a program. So for most of our contexts within the TNE SIG, we work with joint institutes. So for example, I work with University of Leeds and Southwest Jiao Tong University, and we have a joint school together. So we have engineering students, but they learn through the medium of English, right? But EMI is not really cut and dry. It's a bit more nuanced than that. So while my students learn physics, maths, engineering classes in English, there are other required classes that they have to take that they will have in Chinese. And just because it's EMI doesn't mean that there won't be a mix of different languages used in the classroom. Another important thing to note is that language support is not guaranteed in EMI. So there's this idea that there will be incidental learning that will take place. So if they learn in the medium of English, their English levels will improve. So obviously I think maybe as I'm a lecturer in EAP, our joint institute does have EAP support and language support for our engineering students, but that's not always the case. So there is this idea of content and language learning. Is there a trade-off between the two of them? So by trying to get students to improve their English language skills? Are we not focusing on content? If we're focusing on content, will they not improve their English language skills as much? And so far, it's a bit inconclusive. There's no significant evidence either way, but there has been a few more recent studies that have said that English proficiency is related to content learning. So if you maybe voluntarily join an EMI program, it will be easier for you to understand the medium of instruction and to internalize the content. And so in Chung and Lo's study, what they found that was really interesting was comparing the EMI students with Chinese medium instruction students. Was the Chinese medium instruction students did better in the midterms, but then there was no significant difference by the time they reached the final exams. So in essence, they said maybe the EMI students kind of caught up once they got used to the mode of instruction. But when it comes to identity, there is not concern just for students, but also lecturers who now need to teach in English. So this can be an issue if they're worried that their English level is not high enough, if it will impede them from connecting with students if they feel they need to use English all the time. It can change dynamics between lecturers and students, so students might feel more comfortable interrupting or correcting lecturers if their English proficiency is a bit higher. And another idea related to identity is that the EMI lecturers or subject lecturers don't see themselves as teaching language, even though we have those ideas about how students' language will improve. Whether or not this is true in EMI contexts, a lot of subject lecturers have stated that it's not my area, it's not something I'm teaching, right? But on that note, I'm going to pass over to Sophia.
Thank you, Sam.
There you go.
I've actually gone. Oh, how do I? I've actually gone for slide light, so I haven't got loads of points on my slides, and I realise now I actually regret it a little bit because it does disadvantage people who are more visually kind of oriented. So I just invite you to close your eyes, just to and to listen. I'm just going to tell you a little bit. I'm coming at this from a slightly personal angle, but yes. So for the last 14 months, I've been involved in a collaborative project with EMI and EAP specialists at the University of Glasgow and also at the State Polytechnic in Pontianak, Indonesia. And it's been a project involved in creating resources to support EMI and EAP vocational teachers there. And part of my role in the project was to research ways in which learning could be scaffolded in EMI contexts. And my reading kind of led me to translanguaging, which to be honest is new to me. But it led me to translanguaging, which encourages the natural movement between first and second languages as an approach to developing linguistic and communicative competence. But more importantly, as an approach to validating learners' multilingual and multicultural identity. And Kanagaraja defines translanguaging as the ability of multilingual speakers to shuttle between languages, treating the diverse languages that form their repertoire as an integrated system. And this approach really challenges the notion about the use of English only in the classroom as being a way to encourage and develop students' proficiency. So I connect to, the way I connect to the conference theme is by thinking about what it might mean to an EAP professional to let go of beliefs that English only is the way to go in your classroom, and that perhaps how might EAP identity and teaching be affected by the conversations about translanguaging in the classroom. And so I wanted to describe 3 pieces of research that kind of resonate with my exploration of this area. The first one is a study by Kirsten E. Hiller, 2021, a teacher who's working as an EAP teacher in an EMI context in China. She intentionally introduced translanguaging to promote the use of Chinese students' full linguistic and communicative repertoires. The implication being that communication in one language might be limiting, and that being able to usefully access both languages allows one to assert a multilingual, multicultural identity. So she describes a series of lessons in which students explore cultural issues, and she begins with an introduction to translanguaging as theory, and then culminates in a number of assignments that involve students in conducting surveys, delivering presentations, and writing up reports. And the students were encouraged in this class to research in their L1, and then to make decisions about when and how they'd be using L1 and English. So using some autonomy there. And the results indicated that there was a real contribution to students' cultural knowledge, communication skills, intercultural communication, and to their awareness of identity construction. Now she focuses on the students' achievements mostly, and doesn't necessarily reflect on her own position or identity as an EAP teacher, but I think from her conclusions we can infer that it was a very positive kind of response. Then the second study is by Michelle Gu, Jenny Li, and Liangjian Jiang in China, 2021. So I think it's actually Hong Kong. Sorry. So this is a qualitative study that repositions the image of Chinese EMI teachers from one who's seen merely as a non-native speaker with the implied limitations, to one who engages in a wide range of repertoires to engage learners. And the researchers really challenge this pervasive deficit discourse associated with EMI lecturers, and reimagines EMI as a multilingual and multimodal space of learning. So canvassing 13 teachers from 5 major universities, research universities in China, the researchers found that in addition to EMI lecturers using their linguistic resources to communicate, that the EMI teachers capitalized on their local experience, their knowledge to make content meaningful in the class and in the moment. That the teachers also capitalized on, or also saw the international classroom, because in their classrooms they would have students who are not Chinese speakers, so foreign students who are learning in English in China. So they would use that international space as a reason for using Chinese, so that students can feel at home in that country and in that space. And then thirdly, what they found was that teachers were finding that EMI provided opportunities for developing a translingual pedagogy where English is used flexibly. One teacher noted that allowing students to use their L1 and English flexibly led to greater creativity, agency, and enjoyment of learning. And then the final study that I wanted to talk about is one that was done by Kirsty Williamson in 2021. This takes place in Australia, working with students in an EAP program, so not an EMI context, but in an EAP program. She looks at the use of translanguaging in vocabulary lessons, and what she found, and may not be surprising, was that translanguaging was the core practice in students' vocabulary learning, with students looking up words, taking notes, discussing meaning in Chinese. And she describes how impactful that was for Chinese learners in a positive sense. But she also mentions that the learners really appreciated English to English explanations and explorations of language, and she also, with some caution, warns of the possible limitations of translanguaging in a long-term context. And she also reports that teachers themselves held a negative attitude to the use of L1 in the classroom, and that they actually really wanted to emulate an English-only approach. Despite that, she does conclude that conclude and advocate for a translanguaging as a really valuable approach to vocabulary learning and also to English language provision in general. So I'm just citing those three texts and just my own thoughts as a way of just raising the question rather than giving answers, but raising the question of how EAP teacher identity and practice might be changed or might be affected by this whole conversation around translanguaging and allowing that to be present in the classroom. So that's where I'm stopping. And
Thanks. I'm going to pick up the A in our rant and talk to you about assessment deconstructed. Have to start with context. We love a bit of context, but my argument is how important context is. Well, you already know that, but I'll just give a few examples. So I'm working with the newest Reading Academy. It's a Sino-UK joint institute between the Nanjing University Institute, Information and Science Technology, and University of Reading. We have 7 dual degrees where the students are studying 2 degrees at the same time, about 370 undergraduates per year. For the purposes of what I'm going to say now, we have Chinese EAP teachers or Chinese recruited international teachers. So all of the teaching staff are over in China. Quality assurance is from the UK. I'm the program director of our foundation year, which is primarily EAP. You can read it here. And if you can see the 2 screens and you're flipping back and forth, picture how TNE feels to those of us involved in TNE. You've got the UK, you've got the Chinese, and you're somewhere in the middle, this sort of liminal third space. We're in that, the teachers are in that, the students are in that, and there's all of this lovely mix going on. So I entered the equation in 2017, at which point a lot of decisions were being made about the way forward from the 2018-19 year. And you've got a few of them listed here that relate to assessment. A switch from general English to EAP, an example of the textbook they were using to our own Reading materials, a Chinese-based assessment system to a UK-based assessment system with all of our quality assurance. And lots of different types of teaching and assessment going on within the EAP curriculum. I'm going to mention one particular example of a switch we made from IELTS to our own test, but that's by no means the only thing we did. But this was a lot of disruption. We had these really experienced Chinese teachers, lots of expertise and lots to give us, but less familiar with the EAP teaching and the EAP assessment we were asking them to do. We did needs analysis, we did feedback in sessions, but that much disruption, there was an institutional imperative to do it quite quickly, whereas, you know, we would have all liked more time. So we got going. It went pretty well. But we were lucky enough, we kept saying we need to really find out more how this test and this assessment that's been moved to a brand new context, how it's going. So sorry, I'll come back to that slide in a minute. The TEEP, just to focus on that as my example, is the test of English for educational purposes. It's a well-established test that's used at Reading and other places. So the construct, the test specifications have been researched and worked through a lot. But we've moved it to a very new context of use. And that's quite interesting to see how that plays out, that new context of use. So we were lucky enough to get some funding to do a project looking at the assessment, the EAP assessment in our TNE context. So on the right, I put everything on my slides. On the right, you've got the details of the project. I'm not working on it alone. I'm lucky enough to work with 2 colleagues from our assessment team who would be able to answer any proper assessment questions. But we're looking at EAP assessment literacy. So we're focusing in on our own institution to understand, to better understand, we have some understanding, the assessment literacy, so the needs, questions, concerns, and knowledge of our teachers and our students, with an idea of widening it up to the EAP in China, or the EAP in TNE in China context. I've put a few quotes there because, I really should. But, they had a reason. So it's very much a work in progress. We've done some work that you can see here. You can see we're planning to widen it out. So I'll just mention the teacher questionnaire and how rich it is. And this is another beautiful thing about the TNE context, is the learning and what we've gained from the situation. So we did a teacher questionnaire where we asked them 20 questions about their EAP assessment practice, experiences, needs, and training preferences. And we followed that up with a focus group to explore it more, which has given us this rich data that we want, that we can build on and use. So we heard some things that we already knew, that students wanted more model answers and more direct test preparation. We've heard that from the students. We've heard that recounted by the teachers, that would facilitate their teaching. So fine, we need to think about ways to engage with that. To what extent do we include more model answers, and to what extent do we educate on the reasons why we don't? And there's bound to be there already is a middle ground, but do we need to shift that middle ground? But other illuminating findings in our switch from IELTS to TEEP, we got feedback on how wonderful it is that there aren't so many published materials for the students. So IELTS has endless textbooks, and the teachers reported how pleased they were that the students couldn't go away and do lots of rote test drilling in all of these published materials. So we're going to put all of this together, but really my point for today is that TNE, it's got this, for me at least, this sort of reconstructive power. It allows us to shine a light on our own practices. So there's lots that we do, we're always interrogating, but having this whole other perspective from the whole other side has been wonderful for my journey, and I think many of the UK practitioners are in this position. We're engaged in these collaborations overseas, but we have a lot to learn from our partners there. I'm going to stop there because I've lost all track of time. I'll answer questions at the end, and context is everything. But now we're going to move to another context, knowledge sharing. And this is from our colleague Stella, who can't be with us because she's in China at the moment, but has pre-recorded a talk. So.
Hello, I'm Stella, and I'm a senior lecturer at Nottingham Trent University. I'm very sorry I can't be with you today. I'm going to talk about a program I manage that supports MA.
We're just worried about the volume. Oh, here we go. That should help.
Yeah.
Students studying on our Joint
Okay?
Institute program within Communication, University of China. Now, students have been taught online year one ever since COVID, and year two are taught either online or face-to-face in the UK. We're returning to teach year one in China very soon, and that's triggered some rethinking and new plans for us. And today I'm going to briefly share some ways in which our imminent return to China has triggered some deconstructing in our thinking and our approaches to a cultural and social programme, our research, and the feedback and data that we've gathered. So, our cultural and social programme was set up about 3 years ago in response to us teaching online in year one and being at a distance from our students. And it centres on building communities, learning communities, which has become absolutely critical to the programme, with us having that distance between us and them. And as well as helping students on various educational and personal levels, it's also helped us to connect our students in China with students in the UK. It's also helped them to understand NTU culture and different cultures, a wide variety of cultures. It's aided retention. One of the important aspect of TNE program is having that sense of connection with the other university, and we've certainly felt that during the COVID period, and it's also helped students develop their everyday English, because again that's been one of the problems we found of teaching online, and not having that exposure to everyday authentic English. And social events have been facilitated by Nottingham University's Global Lounge, which is a team which is solely dedicated to the international student experience, and I think we're really lucky to have them. They've really helped us, and we've worked out with them a range of weekly social events, which can be, they're both face-to-face and online. We've got students involved in NTU events like presenting at fairs, giving workshops, getting involved in pilot programs across the university, finding language buddies at NTU that they can practice their English with, and that's again face-to-face and online. And feedback's been great, and it's helped us build a really expanding community. There's one issue. In a partnership with Communication University of China, this has been largely NTU led. So in an attempt to deconstruct that focus, and with our imminent move back to China, our colleagues in China are creating their own global lounge, the ICUC Global Lounge, and facilities have been earmarked and will be furnished as part of this project, and a menu of services being drawn up, and by working with the NTU Global Lounge, they're exchanging that knowledge and information, but the Global Lounge in China will include more services to suit their own local context. And Communication University itself has quite a large international community on the campus that we've never really tapped into. There's a lot of students from a wide range of countries, and we feel that we could get them involved, and then connect both students in China, and also then connect them with our NTU staff and students through our online events. And the benefits of kind of looking at this in a different perspective, deconstructing our perceptions, is that we're broadening our offering to students and our communities. We're developing a co-created service to strengthen our partnership, and we're also exchanging knowledge between us, which can only be a good thing. And then related to the social and cultural programme is our research and presentations. So we've done quite a bit of research through this project, and we presented what we've learned and what we've achieved. But again, one of the problems, it's NTU led again. We're not jointly working with our partner on this, and I think we're missing out. We're missing a trick here. So again, deconstructing this focus that the research stems from the lecturers in the UK. We've started to publish with our students. We've got a very good museum article that was developed with students in year one and one of their lecturers. And in fact, some of my students did a workshop on how to pronounce Chinese names through this TNE SIG, and we had about 50 teachers there. And we did another event, all led by students, where they did a workshop with 20 of their own lecturers, which I thought was really brave of them. And now that we're returning to China, one of our objectives is that we're looking for opportunities to work jointly with staff at ICUC on research projects that they would like to do, that they would think would be beneficial, and then also looking within the wider community of the whole university, the whole of Communication University of China, again to collaborate on different research and presentations. And the benefits of this, again, very similar ideas. It strengthens our relationship, it supports the wider activities of our now widely grown community, both in the UK and China, and it broadens our knowledge, for sure. And then a final area I wanted to talk about was how we gather research and the types of data. So, although this has been effective, the feedback we've gathered from our course, our EAP course, our MA courses, and also the social program, the social and cultural program we've developed, again, is NTU led in a partnership, and also quite opinion based. We want to really look at other ways we could collect that data. So again, by deconstructing that focus, we want to, on the course, jointly agree with our partners the questions, look together at the frequency of when we gather that data, and in terms of our social and cultural program, we did gather a lot of data, but again, it was just opinions. We don't really know how, was it really effective at developing students' language skills. So with our partners, we want to implement some kind of test whereby we're testing students' language development for those that are attending the social and culture program, which could be, and then stemming from that, we can then jointly with our partners produce research and share our findings. And again, the benefits are that we're taking into consideration the research that our partner wants to do. We're working collaboratively and mutually beneficially. We're exchanging knowledge, and then from that more data-driven information, we can make better informed decisions on the course. And so I think it's really interesting how now a shift in our focus, the fact that we're going to spend some of our time in China is, it's made us, it's almost deconstruct our thinking and the way we approach the delivery of the programme and the social and cultural programme in terms of our how we want to deliver that social and cultural programme, how we want to go about our research publications and presentations, and as well as the way we gather feedback and the data we're collecting. So overall, I think this shift, this deconstruction has a multitude of advantages for our partnership, as well as for the knowledge that we can share with each other, and the learning communities that we're building. So thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Stella. Okay, I've just said I've got 10 minutes, no longer, okay, because I can see your lunch eyes are on.
I'm Stella.
Oh, no, Stella, you can't come back on. It was excellent, but once is enough. Okay, so I'm Jennifer, and I'm from the University of Glasgow, and I'm going to focus on transition. So I'm the last T in the RANT. Well, I thought RANT, is it RANT? Is it a narrative? I saw that RANT was in narrative, so it's probably both. So it's a ranty narrative I'm going to give you, I think. Okay, so my talk, very short talk, is going to focus on how myself, it is a narrative, or how we, and by this I include my colleagues in China, often have to navigate through quite complex changes or transitions. And anyone who's involved in TNE probably knows that. I know a few people here who are involved, and we've been having lots of chats about it. So quick context setting, again, you've had all our contexts, but I'm employed by the James Watt School of Engineering at Glasgow, and I'm embedded within the School of Engineering apparently, and I work solely on a joint undergraduate engineering degree in China. Okay, but I'm based in Glasgow, or I have been completely based in Glasgow since the pandemic. So it's a Triple E undergraduate engineering program. It's a 4-year degree program. The students do all of their learning in China, in Chengdu, except for a few of them who like to come to Glasgow and do either a 2+2 or a 3+1. But there are very few of them that come over actually. Okay, so that's our setting. We started in 2013, so we're now at the 10th year anniversary. I'm looking at Anna Lee here because it's her fault I have this job. She made the suggestion that I apply for this job. So our programme is now at full capacity. We've got approximately 2,200 students on campus in Glasgow College UESTC. The building that I've got here is actually an old building. We've just had a new building created for it. So it's about 540 students per year. And we also have just opened another campus with another degree that is a mirror of the degree in Chengdu, in Hainan. I don't know if any of you know Hainan. It's supposed to be the Hawaii of China. Or it will be the Hawaii of China, maybe. Okay, so that's the context. And then my context, well, I started on this in 2017. I started on a 0.33-month contract, and then after the 3 months I ended up being permanently embedded in the School of Engineering, and I guess my role was actually to fix a broken system. So the students were taking English courses at Glasgow College UESTC for 3 semesters, year 1 and year 2. They had a lot of credits. They still do have 120 credits in total of English language. The English courses, when the joint programme was set up, were given to the Chinese university to look after, and the requirement was IELTS 6.0 at the end of the 2nd year to progress into 3rd year. The students all passed the internal assessments in year 1 and year 2 at the end of each semester, then went off and took an IELTS test, and at least 50% of them, you're nodding, got less than the 6 that was required, so we had to do all sorts of remedial work there. So that was what I was asked to look at. Oh, and the engineers also had a great, sorry, I hope there's not any engineers in here. Are there any engineers here? Engineers are great fixers of things, quick fixers of things, and their solution to one of the problems of the students failing these IELTS, or failing but not getting the right level, was just to keep testing the students in IELTS. So we had there were monthly weekend tests for IELTS that the students had to do, like constantly, for years it felt like. Okay, so between 2017 and 2021, we developed a completely new system. The first year was probably taken up in trying to find out what was going on and come up with ideas. The curriculum and the assessment development were the responsibility of myself and another colleague in Glasgow. But we worked very closely with our UESTC partners, and we had a kind of co-lead system so that we discussed everything we were doing. But actually we designed the curriculum, we designed the assessments. We moved from the IELTS syllabus, we moved into an EGAP into ESAP model. We grew the team that were teaching English, again, a little bit like Liz and a few other people that have spoken, I think, where all the teachers were based in China. The majority of the teachers are Chinese nationals who are employed by the Chinese university, and we have about 25% international teachers also employed by the Chinese university. So no direct line management over any of the teachers at all. Here's the complexities of things. So the team, when I got there was only about 4 or 5 teachers. And they, most of them, it was their first teaching job at all. And on top of that, they employed a couple of international teachers, and then they outsourced work. So they employed people that belonged to the local IELTS language centres. They brought them in to teach as well. So they had, they really didn't care, because it wasn't their real job. It was like an hourly rate pay. We now have over 30 teachers, as I say. And in terms of development, we have professional development Moodles. We have 1 week every semester where we do a PD week, which works really well, actually. It gives people a break from teaching as well. We all like a bit of respite, don't we? So we developed all the materials in the form of course books with teaching notes, videos, audio, etc., and all the assessments. And there's a very high weighting for coursework. Okay, to finalise the courses and have an internal progression system, we took an engineering course that's called Engineering Career Skills, which most engineering degrees have something like this. And we kind of co-opted it. We took some of our credits from our English language, we added that together, and this is now our final course. So we now have 4 semesters of English, but that course is the course that is used for progression internally. Okay, so that was where we were, and then we get to more changes, or what I call a transition. Okay, transition. So in 2021, and this took place after we delivered all our new courses for the first time, interestingly, and we were kind of into the second cycle of this 2-year programme. UEST senior management said, okay, actually, we want the courses back. We don't want you in charge of them. We don't want you looking after them. We want the local staff to take back control, I guess is the phrase that's used a lot today. So apart from our final course, which was a University of Glasgow course, and I have to say I was a bit worried about this, how would it actually work? I was a bit worried about the time frame, how we were going to do it so that it was managed, and we took the time to make sure that people had the skills to do this. So we now have what we call a managed transition. So UESTC provided a little document that had their ideas on it. I won't use the term back of a fag packet, but then I took that and I developed what we call the transition document. And there are the changing responsibilities. So you can see that while USTC's Language Support Centre, so the co-leads that I was working with, they now have, or they're working towards responsibility of most of the management of the courses. My role is much more QA and in 3 areas: assessment, really, teaching and learning materials and professional development. Okay, so what were the benefits and challenges? This is from the teachers and the course leads at UESTC, what they felt. I've just asked them about this recently. So the main benefits, I guess, are the idea of ownerships and better communication, faster communication, because they don't have to wait till I wake up in the morning to ask me a question is one of the things. And the development of their skills and becoming more understanding. Okay, I'll do it in 2 minutes, I'm going to be over. But it's interesting some of these challenges that they mentioned. I mean, the idea of the joint identity kind of decreasing. I did go out there a lot before the pandemic, 8-9 times a year. So all the teachers that I worked with there knew me really, really well. There are people I've never met now. So perhaps that's part of that lack of joint identity. And one of the international teachers said that they had actually joined the programme because we were a joint institute with Glasgow, and they felt that very strongly, and they felt that perhaps this was a problem. And in the management side, a lot of the kind of course leaders were saying that actually this is even more work and we're not being given the time to develop and do this stuff. So there is this tension of, yes, you get more power or you get more control, but actually the time that you have for it is not really given to you. And it's certainly not given in terms of taking away from the teaching load you have, which is a problem. And I guess my views are quite similar. I think it's great that people understand more about the complexities of what we're doing, and I don't feel that I have to deal with minutiae so much, although I still do deal with minutiae. And I can see lots of changes in the development of people's assessment literacies. But I do feel that, you know, when you've had a baby and you've grown it and then you give it away, which it feels like a little bit, that's quite hard. So I do feel the sense of lack of control, if I'm being honest personally. And there's the communication issues I feel that are that in some ways you just don't know what's happening, you know, because there's no need to tell you. Then you find out later on, you think, actually, I should have known that. So there's this kind of blurring of where the lines are. And the teachers are actually the test setters, and they're creating, the course leads are creating the assessments. This is hugely time consuming because basically I have to do so much work with them and training on how to write tests. So that is very difficult, I think. And I think one other thing to say is that there are a lot of benefits, but there are different priorities that the two universities have. So my focus is on developing the teaching and these actual courses, whereas if you're a young academic in China, a lot of your focus will be on doing research, and therefore there's a kind of tension between their teaching and research. And so this is where we're at. We're trying to climb this mountain, and we're trying to help each other, we're trying to support each other. And by the way, these are called the Penguins in the Wall, and they're a community-based arts project in Glasgow. So if you go onto Twitter, you can see some lovely pictures of penguins in the wall all over Glasgow. So that's me. Thank you very much.
We've touched on a lot of different areas, so it might be a bit cognitive overload. But if you have any questions that you want to ask any one of us, anything that resonates with anyone in the room? Yeah.
Hi, so it's for Jenny. So I've sympathised with everything everyone's said. It's really reassuring.
It really was a rant, wasn't it?
It was, it's great. It's really nice to hear because I've had the same issues with Southampton and Harvard. So when they took the programme back, and did they take, so they took them, am I right in thinking they took your materials and assessments, did they then stop paying so much for that, your services?
No, well, I'm employed on the programme by the University of Glasgow. So the materials, that is actually going to be one of the challenges, because at the moment we haven't got to a point that we've had to update any of the materials yet. But as with all teaching materials that are created bespoke, you need to be updating all the time, you know. And in an area such as engineering, where technology is going like this, you know, we've got materials that actually the students are saying, God, that's not the AI that we're using now, or whatever. So so I think the teachers recognise that that's going to be really challenging for them if they're going to write material and then I'm going to quality assure it. And again, very time consuming. Yeah.
I just have a quick question as well. Sorry, yeah, just another quick question. Obviously you can see sort of some sort of phases here, you know, that we're working through. I just wondered, out of interest, did you sort of anticipate that this phase was coming from the outset, and what do you think is the next phase?
So something I didn't say actually was that when senior management told us that we would, that, you know, UESTC wanted to manage the courses again, and was that we were already going through transition, because our idea was always that we would create something and work with the Chinese lead team and bring people on and help them to develop materials development, assessments, etc. So yes, that it is a phase, and you would expect it to happen. So it was expected, but I think our senior management didn't really understand that, how closely we were working together as a team. The next phase, I think actually some things may have to come back to us. And that's one of the things that we're grappling with the team out there. You know, is actually possible for them to do so much teaching, so much other management work, and, for example, be writing the assessments. And it's very challenging. So that may be something that, at least in the short to medium term, comes back to us.
Thanks to all of you. That's all been really
The same as you.
and lots of points resonate with me. But I'd like to ask Sophia a question about translanguaging. I'm just wondering kind of whether it's a case of, is it us needing to advocate for translanguaging, or is there also an element of just kind of honestly reflecting what actually happens in a language classroom? And you know, perhaps for years we've been living with this myth that L1 immersion is how it happens, but the reality isn't like that. You know, I've just come back from China and observed students with their laptops up, academic articles there, and a sidebar with you know, with translation kind of immediately happening, and that's an observation. That's not a kind of a judgment that this is a kind of good or bad thing necessarily. But I just kind of wonder, yeah, how much is it advocacy and how much is it reflecting the reality?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I actually think it is about just acknowledging the reality. This is how our students are learning, and trying to maybe push a kind of English-only agenda is maybe not helpful, I think, to learners. And so I think it's not so much an advocacy for translanguaging, but maybe an advocacy for questioning the English-only rhetoric or tradition that I think we've inherited as communicative language teachers, you know, from that history. I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on that, because I think, you know, yeah, translanguaging, it's what students do, and assuming that they don't is a bit of an issue. But there is also a sort of sense in which, in the EMI context, there is a division between when their focus should be the language and when their focus should be the content. And I think maybe being aware of, I think you have to be aware of the translanguaging debate in order to say, okay, this is the point where yeah, you can do the translanguaging, you know you can do that, but right now we'd like you to focus on the English, and then the other bit is, well, we want you to focus on the knowledge acquisition in your subject area. And I think it's actually understanding it and packaging it appropriately.
Just to pick up on what you're saying, I think what we haven't said explicitly, but is implicit in all of this in a lot of the institutions we work with, is the translanguaging that's happening with the staff, not just with the students, and I just thought I'd add that in there. Including in their teaching.
And oh, sorry, go on.
No, just that I led TNE projects in the Middle East and China, and completely agree it happens, but from a compliance standpoint, we had a lot of problems because of the OFS and the QAA, and we also had students that were they weren't Arabic speakers, and they were complaining that they were on a Cranfield degree, and there was Arabic going on in the classroom. So this was really taken quite seriously. And the other question was from the Glasgow, what kind of regulatory framework are you under? Because obviously the Scottish system, because we're having issues where I am now with a partner in Vietnam, that previously the QAA and now the Office for Students, they say the admissions have to be the same. It doesn't matter if it's in Glasgow,
So we had
Nottingham or Liverpool.
We had the same.
And the Dean of our faculty is trying to lower the IELTS entry level to the programme, and I'm pushing against that, saying I think that's very risky ground, because if the OFS, which they are going to start looking into TNE partnerships now, if they see that you're delivering the same programme in a different country with different admissions.
No, our admission basically is the same, except that our students, their admission requirement is not when they enter the university, it's after 2 years, it's after they finish their English language.
Get away with that, 'cause we wouldn't have got away.
Do we know how we do that? I don't know, but I mean, one of the things to say about the fact that maybe part of it is that Scotland has a 4-degree system, so our first year, even though it's not a foundation programme, maybe it's counted as a kind of foundation.
You know,
I don't know. Annalie, any ideas about that?
They would have said, no, you've got to have IELTS 6 to enter the programme. What we did, how we got round it, we got our partner, which was Aston, to validate the foundation programme.
Right.
So
I think the Leeds South West Shantung joint school degrees, they have a year 0.
It's a foundation, it's like a foundation year, isn't it? Yeah. So our year 1 is really like a year 0, but it's not called a year 0 because because Scotland is a 4-year degree system.
Yeah.
In the Irish context, it's similar to Scotland, so it's 4 years. And again, end of stage 2 is when they need to have met the language requirement.
Yeah. And we did have to get it put through Senate at the university. I mean, it wasn't that we just decided to make something an internal system. It was quite rigorous. It took us a long time to get it agreed.
Because when I was doing one in China, the admissions, they were enrolling students with like IELTS 3. And teachers were coming out of the classroom saying they can't write.
So our internal system is equivalent to the IELTS 6 that they would have done.
The question's really for all of you, and I'm just curious about the relationship between yourselves and partners, wherever it is that you partnered with. How would you, I don't know if you could pluck a word and say, how does that relationship feel to you? A word or a phrase or a couple of words?
Roller coaster ride. Really good. So that I have a counterpart, the head of English and the teaching team. The exchange of ideas and how we build on each other is just fabulous.
Yeah.
But there are other elements, institutional requirements, cultural misunderstandings that all come into play. So it's, and I imagine they'd say the same thing about us. If we don't always understand their systems, it seems a bit opaque, and I'm sure that, so roller coaster.
That's really helpful. I don't know what about the rest of you. You got a word to describe that one phrase?
It's a bit difficult, I think, because for me personally, I've only joined the joint school last year, so I've had very minimal contact with the staff in China. So we've had some joint meetings, and I, you know, for one of my co-teachers, you know, I had her on WeChat so I could communicate with her. But, you know, using different communication channels and not having that kind of connection for meeting face to face has been a bit of a challenge, I think.
So for you, sort of in progress.
We're working on it. Yeah, we're getting more familiar with each other, and you know.